towards that group as well. Okay. Just give everyone another minute and then we'll get started with the foundations of materials management. For those of you that are already on, I know this year they were, the event was really looking at First Nation participation and, looking at projects and roles in that in the industry. So this is actually a picture from Baffin Island up by Mary River. And this is one of the sea lifts taken a couple of years ago. I was managing it. It gives you an idea of the ship, the cargo ship coming in and the barge offloading and trucks lined up ready to get cargo, because as you can see, we didn't have a lot of time. It's a very short window. So you have to be organized and ready to go. And there was actually, obviously there was First Nation participation on the project, and actually on my team up there assisting with materials. So just a little background. So it's 12:02. So I'm going to get going. People may start joining. One thing I'd like to do is, everybody was muted when they come in, but at the end of every slide, I'll just take a break, and if anybody wants to ask a question, they can unmute and ask the question, or if they have a comment. We have a little bit of freedom today because it doesn't look like it's going to be a hard stop right at 1. So we have a little bit of time for some interaction and questions and some comments too. So just please stay muted. But at the end of every sort of section, I'll open it up to the floor. And with that, again, my name is Christine Harrison. And now I'm just trying to see if I can get, there we go. Okay. So my name is Christine Harrison, and I have been in this industry, well, it's now closer to 25 years than 20 years, I hate to say. So I've been here for a while. I actually started in the industry in safety. And when I talk about the industry, I'm talking about engineering, procurement, and construction management, doing project work. Most of the discussion today is around project materials management. We will touch slightly on operations, but yeah, I came into the industry in safety, and it was actually through trying to organize materials at site, because it was becoming unsafe, is actually how I found my path to this career choice, which has been largely logistics and materials management. My heart is always at site, but I started to learn that in order to fix what was happening at site, we had to go back into the engineering and procurement realms. And that's really, I think, when if you're first getting into an engineering, procurement, construction management project, that you need to have a holistic view. And a lot of times what happens, people become kind of very siloed into what they're doing, and communication starts to break down across the different disciplines. And we're going to look today, that's a lot of what this is going to be about, is looking at the tools that you can use or you can ask for to help align yourself to make sure your program is on track. So I think that's one of probably the biggest pitfalls that I see with projects. I've worked in projects all around the world. I've got a lot of high Arctic experience. Obviously, you're going to see a lot of pictures with snow on them, but also near the equator. I've been in the Sahara Desert, and I've troubleshooted at projects around the world. I've been blessed to be able to do that. And it's always the first thing when I go in to set up or I go in to help a project, is there's a lack of understanding about what materials management is, and where it starts, and how to organize it. Okay, so that's what I want to show you, the tools today, so that it gives you some foundational tools to get alignment and communication. Okay, so I was talking about getting into safety. So I always have a little safety moment. I think that's most of us now in our meetings do have safety or quality or something. And it's very interesting. A lot of even project managers, engineering managers, and even procurement managers don't realize that 50%, I mean, on average, 50% of all the capital costs, so everything in your CapEx, is actually on materials and equipment. And yet it is one of the most overlooked and kind of downplayed of the processes on a project. And when I talk about, tripping on the bill of materials, you're literally, if you're not planning, you're not coordinating, and you're not understanding what you have to handle, I mean, you can have a nice in the picture on the side, you can have a nice organized space that, where things are obviously, you can see what it is, it's stacked appropriately, etc. The paths are cleared away, or you can have something on the bottom, right? And I have come to learn through safety and through doing materials control and materials at site, that if I start to see that happening, if I see something like this, I can almost guarantee that they are probably having cost overruns, schedule delays, and that the planning aspect is out the window. And I also have a pretty good idea that their safety incidents are up. So when we look at the safety incidents occurring, and this is according to the Construction Institute, 30% of all non-fatal incidents are with slips, trips, and falls. But obviously that can be, it's not, it can be a lost time or a medical as well. And back injuries account for 25%. So these, not only are you spending 50% on equipment and materials, but it can potentially be up to 50% of the issues that you're having at site with safety if it's not managed well. And if you're going to actually, plan out a complex logistics materials project, like an ice road or a sea lift, without the foundational information, as I'm going to show it to you, it is very hard to understand, for instance, in an ice road, I have some pictures at the end of some big trucks going across the river. It's going to be very hard for you to be able to plan, for instance, on an ice road, what ice thickness that material can be shipped at, what sling set you need to offload it, what equipment you're going to offload with, etc. And if you don't have that, then you are going to run into bigger injuries than just slips, trips, and falls, right? The pre-planning also helps to organize and estimate your staff required for physical movement of materials on site. And one of the things that's often overlooked is actually garbage disposal. And if you don't know the volumes and what material you have coming and how it's packed, you don't know how to get rid of the garbage, and you don't know what you're going to need to store it. And you can see on the bottom what happens. Like it becomes this overwhelming mess. Okay, so if we start looking at this just from safety itself, it's imperative that you know how to plan the materials. Okay. Now, we have to really determine what is materials management when we're talking in the context of this meeting, but in a project-like setting. And a lot of times lately, I see that materials management is interchanged with supply chain management and vice versa. And I think it's used incorrectly a lot of times. Okay, so the purposes of what we're talking about today is really for a project setting. And by that, I mean, it has like a start and end date. It usually has unique equipment or materials coming to it. And usually the contracts and that are put in place are short term, meaning that it only applies to that project. Whereas supply chain management, the best, I think one of the easiest ones to relate to, if you look at something like the Frito-Lay company that makes potato chips. Now, they own the farmland and they plant the potatoes, and obviously, they process the potatoes. They may own the transports that ship them, or they may hire large, shipping companies to be shipping them. They probably have long-term contracts with, say, an oil supplier, like a cooking oil supplier for cooking the potato chips, right? And these are set up, and it's sort of, you're buying the same things over and over. It's like more of a consumable based supply chain management. And so I think, when I show you the tools that we use today, you can use them there, but they're better served in a EPC, so engineering, procurement, construction, or engineering, procurement, construction management setting, project-based, where you have a start, end date, and unique things. So we could think of Frito-Lay as putting in a brand new process plant. It's going to have robotics and technology never seen before, and we're not even going to use oil to cook them. It's some new health thing. So that's what we're kind of looking at today. Your firm or your company or that has been asked to engineer and manage the building of this new process plant. Okay, so what I'd like for you guys to do, and hopefully I can see the chat, or you can just like unmute and like throw it out there. Where does materials management in a project setting begin? I'd like to get a feel for what people think. Does materials management begin when construction comes and asks, hey, I need that pump? Is that when it begins? Or does it begin when the material comes to site? So a lot of people feel that materials management starts when the equipment arrives. Or does it start when it's purchased? Anybody have an idea? Does it start when it's requisitioned? Anybody want to be brave and just throw something out there? Everybody's.
I'll try. My name is Jürgen. And I think it's part of the planning process when you figure out what the plan is and when things have to be delivered to be installed and all that. If it's just in time, well, that's even more important. If you're going to store, well, then you still need some planning on where to put it and how to access it correctly and manage that. So you don't have too much stuff on site or more than you need on site to begin with until you actually need it, I guess.
Right. And that's, thank you so much for being so brave and speaking up. I'm actually going to argue, or I am going to my feeling is, and everything I show you here today is based on pain. Okay. So something happened along the way that I learned a lesson about materials management. I will say I did have some great mentors along the way, but I still feel that it's really not understood in the industry. My true belief and my passion on this is that it actually starts in the engineer's brain. Materials management starts with the inception of that idea. So, I'm an engineer and I'm building the Frito-Lay plant, and I see this massive conveyor belt bringing stuff, something like that. That is where materials management starts. And why does it start there? Because that's the stuff that you need to build the plant. And that has to start to be communicated and relayed down a very long line. And we're going to look at that in just a second. And, it's great to have this the best ever, I sound like maybe a bit like Donald Trump, the best ever drawing, the best ever plant and design. But if you can't communicate clearly what it takes to build that, it'll never get off the paper, right? And not only do you want to build it, because probably we can build it in the end, but you want to build it on time and to a budget, right? That's why your company or that has been hired. You're being held to task. So Frito-Lay is saying, look, I want this, but you have to do it $500 million, right? So, not only are you designing and buying and everything, but you have these parameters you have to work in. And I'm going to show you why I truly believe it starts at the inception here, because this in here is going to fall out onto some paper. So the next thing, and I'll get to the timeline, but we need to understand who is our client. And when I say who, I'm talking about all the engineers involved, and there'll be all sorts of discipline engineers and an engineering manager and a project manager, the procurement team, right? Well, who is their internal client? Who do we have to ensure gets what they need? Some may say it's Frito-Lay. I do not agree. It is the construction management team. They are going to set the methodology of how that plant is going to be built. And they need certain things to do that. Okay. And we, all the people up front, need to, because, let's just say, as I'm saying I'm talking as a materials manager, we need to ensure that they have that when they need it. So let's just take a look how this is going to work, because construction is going to organize their requests in a certain fashion. They may organize it by, they may be calling material by, it's called many things, but a construction work package, a field installation work package, installation work. I mean, there's all sorts of terms in the industry, but basically, I'm going to show you. Whoops, sorry. We need a timeline, okay, because project has start and end. We need a timeline, and then we're going to see a whole bunch of stuff come up. So here's up in the corner. Can you guys see the green and blue squares? This represents the Frito-Lay building, okay? And construction comes along, and they're obviously looking for constructability, safety, within budget, efficient, best materials that suit what they're building, right? And they're going to say, look, we're going to, for all the mechanical equipment in this part of the building, we have a CWP1 and a CWP2. And the beauty of this type of program is that it allows construction flexibility and adaptation. So, and I've seen it happen where all of a sudden, for some reason, you were going to start off, your schedule was you were going to CWP1, but something happens, like, I don't know, a flood comes and takes out part of the, 1 in 500 year flood takes out part of your building. But, I'm just using this kind of like facetious, but something happens. So construction knows what they need for CWP2, the blue box. So what are they going to do? Well, they're going to come and ask for material with some type of methodology. And in the industry now, CWPs and FIWPs are pretty standard, okay? But what does that mean for us? Like, we're, this is our customer, so what can we do to make sure that they get the information they need and get the supplies and equipment? So a lot of, and I will tell you, if you take nothing away from today, please take away this timeline, okay? And I'm just going to, over here, that little guy that just popped up, that's the engineer, that's the inception of the concept and the design. And they're going to do a bill of materials, and it's going to have the tag and quantity and description. And for instance, here we got 6 pumps, okay? And they have to do a requisition. So they need to go through a process and have that approved. And they go to procurement and they ask for the requisition. So there's a requisition number. Then then there's going to be obviously a purchase order. There's all sorts of little boxes in between, but the purchase order number, the packing list. Now the packing list is often dropped. It comes as a PDF, but it's very important because this tag way back here in the bill of material, which is pump 1, it goes into CWP1. Okay, it's destined for there. So already in the bill of material, you've got 4 pieces of information that you need to be able to track. You've got the tag, the quantity, the description, you've got the CWP, and you probably have a package, what they call a procurement package, like PM001, for instance, right? 5 pieces of information. The requisition, how do I know if it's been ordered? There's a requisition number, or if the request has been made to order. Then the purchase order number. Now the packing list, it's going to have from the supplier, I call it all the children, right? So in the bill of material, we have that unique tag because this is a one-off for this potato plant. So that tag number is going to have, pump 1, 2, 3, but it's going to have a bunch of things that you need to have to install it. And those are all the children tags. And we need to know where they are because I can have all the pumps, but if I don't have the children, and I'm looking down around my ankles and that for them, if we don't have that, we can't install it. And our CWP, that green box, is not going to get built. So you must ensure that however you're tracking your material, and when I say a system can be, a fancy materials management system, and there's a few out there, or it can be an Excel spreadsheet. It can even be done by hand, okay? But You need the ability to cross-reference all these pieces of information. This will be needed by the warehouse at site. Okay, and I'm going to show you why it's needed before it gets to site right now. So you get a shipping release note. There's all sorts of different terms in the industry. It could be a packing release note. It could be a ready release note. There's all sorts. It just depends which company you're with. But I called a shipping release note, and all that means is that we know it's been packed, it's ready for pickup, and we know everything that's in it. So we know the parent and we know the children, and somehow we're referencing all the other pieces of information that came before it. Okay. They have a transport release note, which is usually a bill of lading and an airway bill. Okay. And all of this process is in procurement. So I put like shaking hands, like it's, they signed the contract and it's ready to get in a truck or go across the ocean. And finally, it's at site and the material receiving report is done. And then they store it and then they issue it, material issue report. And, oops, sorry, keep hitting the wrong arrow. There, we're ready to break ground on CWP1. So why is it important that before it gets to site and way back here at the bill of materials, is it important that we start to track that information? Because this could be 6-7 months before it gets to site, but we're consolidating this information in some format. And like I said, hopefully you have a materials management system. You need to understand that here in construction, if you want to be adaptable, you want to be ahead of schedule, you want to be, hitting all your targets, you don't want to be asking for material. You don't want to know if the material for your construction work package is there a few days before you're going to install it. You don't want to, you want to know way before that. How far? Well, where I've seen this work more than once. When it's done correctly, you will have construction up to 12 weeks asking for where the material is for CWP1. There's a couple of reasons for this. If you don't have the material, okay, obviously your schedule could be blown and so could your budget. But more importantly, you have contractually obligated yourself to have that material on site to build that CWP. If construction opens that CWP up for a contractor, we have promised, we have guaranteed we would have the material there. What happens if it's not there on the day that the little pickaxe goes in the ground? Probably you're going to have a claim, okay? Because the contractor is going to say you're holding them up. So you need to ensure the construction management team or the construction team wants to know, can we open the CWP up? And if a CWP is sized right and it's managed right, usually they want to make sure that the material for that is on site a month before, at least 4 weeks before, okay? On site, that means here. But I see construction planning weeks and weeks in advance, and they will start asking, they want to know, well, has the order been placed? That could be 12 weeks, even longer for long lead items in advance. Is the order placed? The other thing they want to see, how much of the order is shipping, right? This is very important. So you can see down here, I gave an example, and I have seen this stop projects before in their tracks. And it really hurts when you're on a remote site. So 6 pumps that's what it takes to build CWP1, 6 pumps. 6 were wrecked, 6 were purchased, 6 were on the packing list, 6 were packed, but they were packed in separate containers. They're so big, there's 3 pumps and all their stuff in one C container and 3 in the other. So an example. What happened was there was something happened with the forks at the suppliers, and they went through the 1C can. So only 1C can got on the truck, went across the ocean, and got to the warehouse, okay? But we could tell, as we're tracking the information, that the other 3 got on the next week. And so construction will say, I've only got 3 at site, but I queried the information through my materials manager, and he's telling me that it looks like the other 3 will still be at site 3 weeks in advance of the CWP. So I am going to release the CWP to the contractor. Okay, So a lot of teams, and if you're organizing material or you're part of this chain, you need to be asking, if you're not seeing this, you need to be asking why, and you need to understand that this is why it's a holistic program. Because what happens down here, down at the bill of materials and PO and that, it has to make it through to the site materials team in a consolidated format. So, it's very hard if you're at site and you get all these pieces of information in different places. Has anybody tried to organize 10,000 line items and it's all coming from different information streams? And it's in a PDF or it's in Excel or it's in an email, etc. It's not possible. It's not possible. Well, it's not possible to do it that way and do it well, to really shine, right? So you have to remember this, and we're going to kind of get into the tools, but I just wanted to make sure up front that, does anybody have any questions about this? Does this make sense? Because this is a lot of information coming at this group. Does anybody have any questions? That makes sense? Does anybody want to argue or debate whether it starts way back at the bill of materials? Maybe you have, no? Okay. So if you can start thinking that way, you are on the road to a holistic overview of materials management, okay? So of course, what's the next picture that you would assume to see in a materials management presentation? Well, a dinosaur, of course. Okay. So I have trouble sometimes, and I've done these kind of workshops before, and I always talk about the foundation, or the skeleton of your plan and your processes, the bones of it. So I thought, I'm going to put up a lovely dinosaur, and we're going to start to build the bones around this dinosaur, okay? Or we're going to, let me put it this way. Think of your material, all your materials are like the bones of this dinosaur, and they're all scattered all over the floor, and you now have to put them up in a museum. So how are we going to organize all that? Okay, so organize a skeleton. We're going to do it through a materials responsibility matrix. And I have seen various versions of this over the years. There's one I use in particular. It has a lot of detail, but I think if you're not using one now, I'm going to show you sort of a starter one, but you'll get the gist. And as you use them, you can build on them. Something very important about the materials matrix, and it often gets dropped. First of all, it's not hard. It's not rocket science, but you need to be dedicated and you need to do the work, because what it's going to provide to your team is a snapshot of who is doing what at any moment in time. And I can tell you, when things change, contractor changes, somebody can't provide that material, you need to be able to go back to this and know who's doing what. This is essential. This is essential if you're going to be doing a complex materials program. I think it's essential at any time, but certainly if it's something complex where you're going remote, you have various consolidation yards or lay downs in that. This is you need to have this. So how does it work? First of all, you can set it up on an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, it's pretty easy. You can even actually do it by hand, I guess, but Excel is best. I have seen these get up to thousands of lines. Okay. Next thing, you're going to have a spot for engineering and what they do, procurement, and construction. Okay. Somebody may bring up, well, what about commissioning? For today's program, let's just consider commissioning is more in on the operations side of it. We're just going to look at this for today. If you're putting in commissioning, then you're definitely advanced in your materials management program as they organize it by systems. So what are we going to put under materials? So materials, I just have something simple here, mechanical. So pump, tank, gaskets. But you are going to put on all the material and equipment, and I mean all of it, all of the material and equipment that you need to build that potato plant. Gaskets, O-rings, anchor bolts, mesh. I mean, everything has to go here. Or what are you going to have? Something's going to get missed. And if it gets missed, it's going to hurt your CWPs or hurt your program at site. I mean, it could lead, ultimately, and I'm not joking, it can lead to safety issues. Okay, so what I've done in the past, if you're on here and you're trying to understand how you can align your teams or your groups, I have found that, you go to each lead for the discipline lead. So we have mechanical, electrical, structural, architectural, instrumentation. I know I just missed somebody, but you go through all of them. You look at the spares as well, everything that's going to be needed to build that. You may not be providing it, but you need it to build it, so it's got to go on the list. Okay, and I'll show you why. Because then, oops, I'm in the wrong one. Then, and you can have as many columns here as you want, but I'm showing you for engineering just to get the gist of it. Who's doing the specs? Who's doing the data sheets? Who's doing the drawing and the modeling? Who's doing the MTO? Who's doing the requisition? Okay. Oh, sorry guys. Procurement. Okay. Who's going to do the RFQ and the so the request for proposal and the request for quote? Who's doing the purchase order, expediting, quality, logistics? Okay. Who's going to do your site receiving, your material receiving report, your storage, and preventive maintenance, materials issue, install, spares. And I can tell you, you can put many more columns down here, but I'm trying to, it just depends what your company or your project is doing. But any place that there is a physical or information touch point, it should be on the matrix. And you can see what happens. Say for the pump, the engineering company took it right through. They received it at site, but for some reason they have the contractor helping their site materials team do the preventive maintenance. But then they issued it to the contractor installed it, etc. Okay. Oops. Okay, sorry about that. And then this is key. You need to have this red column. These red columns. This is telling you, now you're really going to start to get organized. You are going to start to organize this into the procurement packages and the construction packages. And this can be used with excellent results as you do your contract strategy and formation, because you can see you're not going to miss any material of who's doing what. You put it all down along the side. And I mean, I've given this to, say, a mechanical engineer, and it's not that, once they've, they got their bill of materials and everything, this is usually done in feasibility, FEL, end of FEL2, certainly must be done in basic engineering or FEL3, way before you get to site. It should be done as you're getting your contracting strategy and your procurement strategies in place, okay? Does anybody have any questions? Because this is how you organized all the bones. This is going to show you. Now, if something happens, you can go back and see, well, who was responsible for that? Oh yeah, we got to get, we're taking that over now. Okay, well, what do we need to do? Okay, this is just one, this is first tool, okay? It's going to be used in conjunction with a couple more here. Does anybody have any questions? Has anybody used a matrix like this? This, you should be, yes, sir, go ahead.
Wouldn't operations be another column, I guess, after the construction is done? What happens with that piece of equipment and who's managing it and
yes,
everything else? Like
yeah,
documentation, everything else that's required for it? Or
absolutely. So like I said, you can put like commissioning on this, and then in operations, that's actually the matrix I use. But not knowing sort of the level of people, the participants today, I'm just trying to show this is the minimum that you would start with. But if you're getting to that at that level, you're going to have a happy client, a happy construction management team, and a happy owner, for sure.
Great, thank you.
Oh yeah, no, it's great comment. Yeah. Anybody else? Anybody else use this? And I don't know the participants' background, obviously. I thought that probably half of you may have attended because you felt some pain at site from materials before. It's usually what brings people brings people in. They want to know how to avoid that next time. But if you're new in the industry, or you're not seeing this, I would ask, how come you're not seeing a matrix? It doesn't hurt. Okay, so keeping with the dinosaur theme, how do we avoid the asteroid hit? And what is the asteroid hit? The matrix is great. So you got your bones and everything structured, but how do we protect it? How do we know what could potentially happen to our program? We need to look at what factors and our outside entities will influence the plan, because we are building, remember, the dinosaur bones, this is the bones of your plan, the bones of your processes. What we need to do is we need to be able to answer what I call materials management impact questions. And it's when you see some of the questions, I often get asked, why are you asking that? And then it's actually often by project managers. What does that have to do with materials? Well, there's a reason I'm asking the question. Most, I would say, experienced materials managers will ask a variety of questions, especially if they've been sent in to troubleshoot, because they know that these outside influences can really impact the program. And that's where having a holistic vision or view of this it's essential, because otherwise you won't see the asteroid coming. And if by chance you didn't see it, using these impact questions will help build some resiliency into your program, so that you can take that shock, but you're organized and you know the processes, and it's not going to break it. Okay, so I'm going to, and there's 40 to 50 questions that I usually ask. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to show you some of them here in a second. It really depends on what your industry is, and maybe what some of the key things are that you're involved in, right? So somebody, for instance, maybe is just doing pharma builds. There could be some very key things that might not be in my questions right now, but they know is pertinent to that industry. So I recommend, and this is used to, these tools too are used not just to organize materials physically and in a system, in a materials management system, but it's to get alignment with the team. You've got people, like, obviously all across the functions and disciplines, and they're doing their work, they're getting done, but how are you keeping this, communication, vertically? And again, I go back to the silo. So this is a really good method of getting alignment early in your planning. Okay, if you're asking these and the material's already at site, it's too late. Okay, these questions should be happening before you've even gone out for long lead items, if that gives you some context to put it in. And they cut across all disciplines. Okay, so I would suggest having an alignment meeting first with these questions. And I usually get the project manager, because at the end of the day, a lot of times the project manager knows stuff that the others don't yet. It's quite interesting to see when you do this session with them, how unaligned a project can be, and a fairly far way in. So you need the project manager, the engineering manager, procurement manager, and the construction manager at a minimum. Project controls is good to have, a materials manager, even better, and maybe some of the discipline leads, depending on where the focus is on your project. Okay, so you got this team, you're going to go through with them your materials management impact questions. Okay, so let's just look at some. And it's a very basic setup. So have your question and I use bullet points. Put bullet points in beside, so you can start to get the overall holistic view. And just think of this as putting like the flesh and tough skin and armor onto your plan. Okay, so here's a couple of the questions. Well, how will construction be executed? So are you using CWPs? Do you need to have that? Are there multiple work fronts? Is there challenging terrain and geography? And I just you know what, this is just an example. So CWPs will be used. They're going to schedule by CWPs. And this is important because then you're understanding how those milestones are going to be reflected for how your material is moving. They're going to bring in a contractor early to bring in FIWPs, to do the FIWPs, and multiple work fronts. In this case, they had a water treatment plant and an arsenic plant, okay, that were specific. So what are major construction factors that materials management process must take into consideration? Critical paths forming. Okay, so there could be something that cannot miss that critical path. A lot of times that's related with shutdown work that you may be building around. And here they have, okay, brownfield shutdown work, storage capacity. So do you have enough space? So in some, I've been on some beautiful projects where there is space and even though you have to organize it, you don't have to worry about it. But when you're doing shutdown work, for instance, you have very, very limited space. So that is a major factor. Maybe you have to go off-site, get a consolidation warehouse, right? Maybe so. And I have seen this missed, and it's an expensive mistake. So here's just a few. Here's an important one. What materials management system will be used to manage the project? Now, there's all sorts out there. I've seen all sorts of them. So there's Oracle and Convero, which I think is actually Oracle based, and SAP and JD Edwards, and I don't know what they're calling themselves now. I think it's Hexagon. And there's a variety out there, and there's smaller ones as well. But I can tell you that whoever is implementing your materials management system, they will love, 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 love if you do the work that I've given you with these tools today, because it organizes it and it shows them where the touch points are for the information you're going to pick up. And what information are we looking for? Well, what generates the bill of materials, the description, the tag, the CWP, the PO number, etc. All that I showed you in the timeline, you're going to need to collect that. And the system needs to know how to do that. The other thing that's really interesting, where I've seen a lot of issues in the past, is engineers tend to be blessed with a lot of different design and engineering tools. And in fact, I've seen some where they can hardly get used to one and they've got a brand new one. So I actually feel for you guys if that happens to you, because you're constantly trying to learn a new tool. But the important thing is, how do we get the information out of there? Is it speaking with your company's material management system? If it's not, what is the interface? So I'm going to show you the tools I'm showing you, help you to find that interface, help you to see where that gap is. I've come on projects where a lot of the structural stuff was being done in AutoCAD, and it came out in a PDF, and it actually never made it sometimes even into a purchase order. But that's rare, and that was not in an engineering firm. It was with a client who very rarely did projects, but it happens. So understanding what are you using digitally to organize your materials and manage them. So what is the contracting strategy? Are you using big contractors, small contractors, multiple ones? And that's going to come into play when we looked at the matrix and what materials you're going to have them get. If you're getting a big tier 1 contractor and they have buying power in that, maybe your firm isn't going to buy as much. Or maybe you're going someplace where the contractors, you're going into remote areas or areas that aren't well serviced by contractors. And maybe the client or the engineering firm has to do this. So it's important to know this up front, because this could change your approach on things, right? What percentage of labor force? Incoterms. So are you shipping an FCA, DAP, DDP? This all impacts the material management plan. Because if you're going to ship FCA, are the terms 100% when it's shipped? How are you doing a 3-way match with your purchase order? Usually to pay something, you need the purchase order, the packing list, and a material receiving report. But the material receiving report hasn't been done yet. So will the vendor take a shipping release note? Okay, so will your project controls group take who's paying the bills? Where will accounts payable accept that? So every question I have on my list is from a pain point in the past. I know that you need that information. Okay, and I'll be honest, it isn't anything that I have found in other courses, to be honest. It just really is like, this is like from real life experience. And I've used it on every project that I've gone in to set up in that sense. So is there a heavy haul package? Is it brownfield, greenfield? Are there shutdown activities? And the list is going to, what's your commodity bulk strategy? And if you're interested in what more of the questions are, for sure, you can contact me after. I'll have my contact information for you. But you can get to see the gist, right? You should be thinking, and whether you're the engineering manager, the procurement manager, especially if you're the materials manager, think of what could impact, what asteroid could come out of nowhere. Think of as many asteroids as you can. And that's going to, now we got some, substance to our program, okay? And we're not done yet. Does anybody have any questions on that? Does that make sense? I hope this isn't too boring. I hope this is something new that you're seeing. Okay. Just speak up if anybody has any questions. I'll go on. So, we talk about initiating internal systems of the material management program. Okay. And what we have to start looking for now, and hopefully you can kind of start to see it with the timeline and then with the matrix, right? The touch points as it goes through. So the procession of information from the materials responsibility matrix, coupled with the impact questions, allows the team to create a workflow, okay? And this workflow needs to do two things when you set it up. I'm going to show you an example. And I use this to align teams and workshops. I've been doing it for a long time. And it's the only way, using these three tools, that I've really seen the project team get the big picture, okay? Because it's going to take you from inside here all the way, and in the case the gentleman that mentioned, all the way actually to commissioning, okay, and handover. But your workflow must do two things. It must show physically how the material is moving between the entities responsible for it. And I'll show you in a second how I do that. It has to, how the materials information travels between entities. So is it in a system or is it out of a system? And I want you to think of it like as the internal systems of the dinosaur, right? All the inner workings. This is what's going to make that thing move. This is what's going to create your flow. So bear with me here for a second, because I actually have to. Okay, so this is don't be too alarmed at this. Usually, I actually, when I do a workshop with a group, this is actually life size. So this, for a project, I don't know if anybody remembers the show, but project, potato plant, this is your life. Okay, and what I'll do is I'll just go in here, and I want you to start to see some of the, hopefully it lets me do that. Zoom in. So along the top, sorry, I have a new Mac and I'm not, okay, here we go. So along the top, hopefully you guys can see this, you'll see, look at part of our matrix, engineering, procurement, and if I can get it to scroll over, construction on the end, okay? And all along the side, we have all the materials. So electrical, mechanical, or sorry, all the disciplines, all the disciplines. So electrical, mechanical, piping, and along the subtitles, we have material type, design tools, interface tools. So remember the specs, the MTOs, right? And the workflow is basically now showing you how the material is going to flow as represented in the material matrix. And if I can just, there we go. Hope you guys can start to see that. So for instance, in electrical, we have cable tray, and the other thing that we're showing here, so the little boxes represent the processes and basically how it's moving physically, okay? The information, and actually at some point, the actual physical material. The little red acronyms, I am trying to understand where is the information being generated that I can go and get it and make sure that it's cross-referencing. So in this example, they're using a material management system that takes material from the engineering design tool, like the bill of materials, all the way to issuing. And let's just say that we're the engineering company doing this, and we're represented by blue. Anything in blue is us, and red is the system picking it up. And so you can see what what you want is to try and as often as possible keep everything blue. But it's not always going to work, because down here you have the contractor, you may have some demolition going on, you may have a turnkey project. In the workflow, you still must represent every entity bringing material to site. The reason is this starts to become more real to people how big this could be. So how many entities are shipping material to site, and how is it going to be organized once it gets there? Okay, and these workflows, I mean, this is something that a more experienced materials manager is going to be able to do for you. Because what happens then in each little box that's on this workflow, you're going to have more process workflows, right? So for instance, here's the PO being generated by the buyer. Well, there's going to be other little workflow boxes around that. But at least I know as a materials manager, I'm capturing the PO information. So everything along this workflow, there's the bill of lading. For some reason I cannot, oh, maybe if I go like that, here we go, sorry. I'll go up. So here's site material control. It gets to the gate, okay? We control the gate. We do a daily receiving log. Anything in red is in the system. And by the way, when it got here in this system, I had everything. I had the purchase order, the packing list, the catalog number, the bill of material is there. It's all being cross-referenced for me against the CWP. Not all materials management systems may do this, but you have to see, how you can get that from your system, because it's going to be required. Why? Remember the timeline? Construction, look at, here they are. Here they come. Construction management team is coming down and they're querying the warehouse. And they're asking what's in inventory. It's not an inventory. Well, where is it? And if you have ensured that you have, gone all the way back across here, you can find that information. It can be done in Excel. It's pretty hard. It's pretty tough. And the reason it's tough is that I think we all know that the data integrity may not be there that would be in a system, right? So you have a chance of losing your data integrity. And so with this workflow now, you have, sorry, I'll just close that. We'll go back to our slides. Okay, so with that workflow, so you've got the 3 tools. With these 3 things, you can now, I would say with confidence, like I would be, now I'm confident because I've done it before and I know, of doing my materials management plan, my procedures, and my work instructions. And I see the same mistake from project to project. And I probably, if I sound a bit disillusioned, maybe I am, because what they do is they start doing this, they start doing the plan and procedures and work instructions. A lot of times they're basing it off another project that isn't even related to what they're doing, without knowing any of these fundamental, the foundation information required to make a strong plan. So here you've organized everything, here you have your resiliency, and here you know how it's moving, where it's moving, and when it's moving. And now with this, I firmly believe you can service your internal client construction. You will have it there. You'll know where it is. You can, if anything along the way, Something happens, you know where to go to find how to fix it. So, without this, I would argue that you'll never have um, a real successful, efficient, best in class materials management program. You need that first. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about that? Is this just, if anybody can like just shout out, like, is this, did a lot of people already know this, or is this kind of a new approach to your program? Or maybe you guys aren't in the, if you can let me know in the comments, that would be great. So one last thing, our conclusion, and there's, you can see some trucks coming across an ice bridge. These materials management foundation documents they will provide organized and aligned information, and it will help to negate the gaps and risks to produce your plan and your procedures and your work instructions. Okay, there is much more to it than just these foundational documents, obviously, but I can guarantee you that they will support your contract strategy and contract formation. And I've actually seen contracts change after they have gone and done the materials responsibility matrix. Why? There were gaps. They missed stuff, or they thought someone else was doing it, or they didn't put it in the right package. It will support purchase order language. What do I mean by that? Well, when you see that your packing list is coming in PDFs, you can actually put in the purchase order, Mr. Supplier, you need to provide your packing list in this Excel format we're giving to you. Now, bid the package, as opposed to awarding the package and going back, and guess what? Now you're having to manually enter it in your system. Okay, so just those tools can help you see that asteroid coming. Support freight volume planning. This is crucial for anything, all the stuff you see up here. You see the trucks lined up and the space for that. All of that is based on understanding your freight volumes to schedule. And you can understand your freight volumes until you know all the material you're going to be shipping, right? And the packages. Support, and again, that goes into calculating your laydown and warehousing work fronts and making sure you have the right warehousing. Do you have temperature control? Do you have a spot for dangerous goods, that kind of thing? And also calculating your staffing requirements. So I see a lot of projects fail. They don't look at this up front. They don't look at it until they start getting to site, and they usually don't have enough staff because they actually didn't know what was coming at them and how much there would be to handle. It's usually like a thumbs up kind of thing. But this can actually give you some real like mathematical information to help you figure that out. And also calculating your materials handling equipment. And what I'm not making this up. Okay, so I've seen this. They didn't have a workflow. The client didn't have a workflow, but they had consolidation yards. And what happened was they didn't have any material handling equipment at the consolidation yard to load a truck. And not only did they not have the equipment there to load the truck, but they forgot to have equipment at site to offload the trucks. And I'm not kidding. They could not see the holistic big picture. But if they'd had those 3 tools, and that's what we used to demonstrate it, then it would have been clearer to them when you're doing your planning. And then obviously, last but not least, it supports in developing your safety procedures, because the people that need to be doing this can see exactly what they're going to be handling, where it's going to be put, how it's going to be stored. Okay, so ultimately, this will actually help the people at site, because a lot of time the site material controllers, they don't get to site, they don't know about the project till they get to site, and they're looking at a plan. And now your plan is going to have all the pertinent information they need to be able to do that. Okay. but you need those 3 tools. And what we're going to do today is I'm going to make an ebook from this session for you guys and send it to you so that you, because this is a lot of information coming at you, so that you'll be able to start setting that up yourself, and you can go back and reference it if you need to. And it will include my contact information as well. You know, I don't mind people calling and asking for a little bit of help, but I'm also involved in, you know, consulting, training, auditing, optimizing the programs, and that goes into operations as well. And, you know, doing troubleshooting and that type of thing. So does anybody have any questions from today? I will tell you before you leave, thank goodness I remembered this. I have to do something at the bottom here, just a second. I have to hit a poll. I will launch the poll. And this is for you guys to give some feedback on the session. Does anybody have any questions? We have time if anybody wants to ask. If you have any trouble.
Hello, it's Susanna. I just would like to thank you for the webinar. My question is, would it be possible to receive a recording of it, or? Yes,
so they are recording it, and I think we can send it out. I'll find out for you, but certainly I've done some previous webinars and put it into ebooks, and it's great. It will give you the pictures of the slides and all the, well, I edit and make sure all my ahs and ohs and oopses and that are out. But yeah, for sure you guys will get that. I spoke with the organizers before.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for attending today. Does anybody else have any questions?
Hi, Christine. It's Derek. Can you hear me?
Hey, Derek.
Hi.
So if for all those left, Derek and I did a project a long time ago, and that project is actually at the bottom in this picture, way up in the high Arctic. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks.
Good. You didn't mention too much about project controls, and I understand that where, you know, materials are kind of after all the design is done and things are, the scope and the specs are done and everything is going to site. But why don't you mention a little bit about the schedule and how materials people like get into reviewing the schedule? Because I know like a lot of project controls people have a lot of information that helps everybody, but not too many people tap into it.
Oh, okay, so for sure. And I mean, this is actually probably a whole other webinar. Maybe next year I'll come back to do a webinar just on that. But I will say, so with the project controls information and how we use it in the materials management program, there's a few things. So I touched on, first of all, you talked about the, you know, the equipment and the materials. Actually, seeing the equipment and materials laid out in the matrix, I have actually seen construction and procurement get into discussions with engineering, because sometimes project controls will say, well, you're over budget, right? And by allowing to see all the materials and equipment that are going to come to site, it gives the opportunity for the team to make some potential substitutions and some cost savings. That's just like real rough, right? Off the top of my head. Yeah. But we're, you know, then another place we see it is in accounts payable. So nothing stops a project faster than when a supplier doesn't get paid on time, right? And yeah. And so, you know, how does that apply to the materials people? Well, as I mentioned, that three-way match is one of the key places. And if you don't have that communication and you're not working with project controls, you don't, you know, what information is being used to pay that bill? How are we facilitating that quicker? Are we setting up a special project portal where the material receiving reports go? Is it being emailed? But something has to be set up, and this is alignment and communication, and that's what projects are all about. That's really used right now. As far as schedule goes, you know, the other thing is understanding, is the material going to be there on time, or, you know, too far in advance, or on time, and knowing that it got there. So there's two things. If you get into a schedule, a delay, it's costing you money. But also, if you've received something and you don't know where it is on site, and you keep reordering, you're also going to have not only schedule delays, but cost overruns, right? And again, 50% of the project is on your materials and equipment. And I mean, doesn't take a genius to know that if you're having like 0.5% or 1% or a bit more of rebuying when you can't find something, it starts to add up.
Right, the construction contracts are probably the biggest risk going. So if you don't have materials
Yeah.
on site for their construction personnel to install, it goes back to what you were saying before, you're going to get a claim.
Right. And not only that, but I want you know, a lot of projects, I mean, especially mining, and I have a lot of experience there, and so do you. But just think about this. So you're on a remote site and you don't have something there when it's supposed to be. You are paying to feed and house all those people as
That's
well. Like, forget about just, you know, the delay in the claims. I mean, there's all sorts of other incidentals, let's call them, that are happening because you didn't have the material, and you might have it there, but you can't find it. And now you're probably flying it, which is very expensive. So there's all these things that start, you know, to repercussions, right?
Yeah, sometimes it's cheaper to buy it again than go look for it.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes it is, but not, you know, just
Sometimes.
yeah, sometimes. But I, you know, there's some indicators, I guess, that project control starts to notice, but that we also see on site. And some of the indicators that things are going wrong is the mess. So if you start to see a messy work environment, things are not going well. And it could be not enough people, lack of planning, lack of the right equipment and tools, etc. But it all kind of, you know. Now, the other thing, and I will say this for those that are still left, I want you to think about we're on a company that does engineering procurement. We may do construction, direct construction, or construction management. And if you've been on some projects, I want you to think about, where do you see the client the most? Okay, so usually it starts off in the engineering house and there'll be a client representative there. Might be a couple, maybe an engineering representative, you know, looking after the client's interest in the construction or in the engineering house, right? But man, when construction and the site starts to open up, the client, because you know, if it's in a brownfield, you have operations coming because this is going to be their new potato plant. The point I'm trying to make is that the client that's paying the bill, forget about the internal client, but the owner, they're going to have the most representatives when you get to site. So if your materials management program, 50% of what they paid, is not efficient, working well, you know where everything is before it gets to site, these problems become exponential at site. And who's there to witness them? The owner. That's where the owner is that's his property. That's his, right? So I always try and reinforce that point with project teams. You are going to be under the most scrutiny when you get to site. And if you've left materials planning to that point, maybe I'm too mean, but maybe you're going to deserve what you get, right? You need to, you know, you want to shine at site. You want to do well there because that's where the owner is. So that's my advice for, hopefully. Sorry, I'm very passionate about this, so I probably ramble a little bit. Does anybody have any other questions that they would like to ask? And if not, I'll and again, we'll send out the information. If you know, again, if you want to contact me, you have any more questions, you need help, please reach out and I'm available to do so. If not, I just want to wish all of you really, success in any materials management program you take on or in your project. I want to thank you for attending today. That was great. This was one of the topics that hadn't been presented much in the engineering forum. So hopefully it was enjoyable, and we'll talk to you later. Goodbye,
Excuse
everybody.
me, sorry,
No, go
sorry,
ahead.
it's Susanna. Sorry, I just was thinking of risk management. So is there anything people should think of, like flooding maybe, or anything that could occur?
Yes. So and let me just go back up for a second. I don't know if it'll let me now, maybe with the poll launch. Let me just go back up for a sec. So in the questions, I don't know if you can see here. Okay, so this is another spot where I see projects fall down a bit. When you do this, you need to put a risk category against this. And this should be done. It should be done before, and most projects will have like a risk management session. And I have seen in some projects, very large ones, there'll be like 1 or 2 lines around materials, which is, it's not recognized for the beast, the dinosaur, the huge thing, the Tyrannosaurus Rex that it is. You need to be actively, and you need to manage that risk number, right? So you put that risk number against these questions, and the ones that are, like, for instance, any shutdown activities, always construction and project management always see shutdown activities high risk, right? Lots can go wrong in a small amount of time. And I've seen them come back and say, but the materials that we're sending there, that's a 2 or 3. I say out of a 5. I'm just, there's all sorts of risk management templates and programs and methods that you can use, but say 5 being catastrophic, 1 being great. And if you start getting 4s and 5s on this, then you definitely need to start looking in depth at the plan and how you're going to lower that number. And I will say, all these documents, these foundation documents I showed you, these are live documents. You do not write them and put them on the shelf. You need somebody has to be assigned to make sure that this is happening. One of the biggest downfalls I've seen on projects is they do it and then they don't maintain this information. And then when they need it, it's not there. I don't know, Suzanne, did that answer your question?
Yes, I'm just thinking one more thing, the COVID situation. Would there be a risk that some plants might shut down manufacturing plants, so materials wouldn't come on time? So what kind of risk management would you do there?
So, and that's actually a really good question. And I was involved early on in the pandemic looking at this. So, and why? There were some actually operating mines, especially in South America, by fairly big mining companies that were, they couldn't get their consumables. The consumables stopped. And what's interesting is that before the pandemic, so like before we really knew about it in North America, I started to get feedback from logistics managers that were seeing like freight was stopping in Asia. And they would be like, we had a delay, right? And well, how come? Well, there's nobody at the port. I'm like, well, what do you mean there's nobody at the port? I mean, there's nobody there to move it. And so on risk management, I have seen actually risk registers that actually have pandemic on them, that actually consider a pandemic a threat. And this is why, because your supply chain could be affected. And what I've seen done there is they may have alternates. So especially for operations, there may be alternate providers that they can go to, or they have a small contract, something they can set up a contract with. It's much harder in a project, again, because you're usually doing one-offs. But also in pandemic, that has usually a few items to it, because it could affect your labor, could affect your materials management, and it could also affect your the equipment and that you're using. You can't get it, right? So
would it be needed to put a clause in contracts regarding COVID from now on, or just
I'm
to
sure.
protect ourselves financially, right?
Yeah, so I would say I've seen it in general terms and conditions before with purchase orders and contracts. I think for sure now you're going to see, I'm sure the lawyers are having a heyday with it. If it's not on your risk register, it definitely should be. It's not going away. But I have actually seen that. And to be honest, I always thought it was like, you know, when was the last pandemic, right? 1970, but see, another asteroid coming at you.
But thank you very much, Christine.
Yeah, no problem, Susanna. It's good questions. Wow, those are harder ones. Okay, guys, if nobody has any questions, it's 1/4 after. We were lucky enough to get the meeting room this long. I hope you enjoyed it, and I wish you a happy spring. It's a beautiful, I'm in Northern Ontario. It's a beautiful day. I'm going out to enjoy the 10-degree weather. I'll see you guys all later. Have a good day.
Very good.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.